Hi, I'm Alan Moon, game designer, fun guy.
Alan, tell us about your first game design and how it came about.
There's a difference between first game design and first published design. So I think most people, game designers, if you ask them, they would tell you they were designing games as kids. I'm sure that was true of me. I was kind of remember in high school making war games after playing Avalon Hill games. First published design was a Hearts variant called Black Spy. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's tricky. I mean, that was really my first published design. It was by Avalon Hill. In a sense, my first published design, other than I worked at Avalon Hill, so that was kind of cheating a little bit.
Right.
My first published design was a game called Wer hat mehr, which was by an Austrian company, Piatnik, and that was an Oh Hell variant. And again, Oh Hell and Hearts variants were very natural for me because that was what I played as a kid with my family.
How did you start White Wind? Were you still at Avalon Hill? Did you have to break away? Tell me about that process.
Now, from Avalon Hill, I went to Parker Brothers. For a couple of years, I was in the video game department, and then I was laid off when the video game thing crashed for a while.
Okay.
So at that point, I tried to be an independent game designer. It was extremely tough for any number of reasons. We didn't have the internet back then, and basically, I went to work as a waiter, and then one of my German friends convinced me to start my own game company, White Wind. And we started with the idea that we'd produce limited editions of 1,200 and hopefully be able to sell the rights to a bigger company. That absolutely didn't happen. We did probably everything you could do wrong with a game company. And it was very stressful. I'm not the person who gets stressed very often in my life, but first couple of years when we went to Essen, when I had White Wind, it was really stressful.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, but I was looking at these. I mean, the components are fantastic. You have wood, you have custom dice. It's all in here.
Yeah, I know
did they start this way? I mean, these are first run, right? This is a 15 numbered copy right here.
Right, this is the number 15 out of 2000. It's missing Elven Roads, which went to somebody who was desperate to have a copy. Otherwise, this is the complete set of number 15. No, the components of the games were nice. The artwork's a little amateurish, but yeah, no, I don't think the quality of the game was anything. But it's just tough. There's so much competition at Essen, and like I said, it was very stressful. And I wasn't a businessman. I did everything wrong that you could do without knowing how to run a company as a business.
Right.
So after 5 years, I just stopped doing it. At that point, the company was a complete failure, and then fortunately in 1998 or 1997, Amigo bought the rights to Elven Roads, I made a new version into Elven Land, and then all of a sudden White Wind looked like it was a genius move.
Right.
But it's like anything else. There's a lot of luck and chance and good timing involved.
So Elven Land, tell me about that. What year was that, the award winner?
Elven Land was 1998.
98.
Yeah.
How did that change the trajectory of your designs, your career?
Yeah,
Or people knocking on your door saying, give us a trick-taking game with
whatever? Game companies don't really ever come knocking on your door too much, but I mean, that really, for me, I always think about that got me back to zero. I was hugely in debt at that point, pretty down, and I mean, I'm not a down person, but pretty frustrated and kind of thinking, I wasn't sure whether I was going to really have a career as a game designer.
Right.
So that brought me back to zero. I didn't own the rights to the company White Wind completely. I had a lot of investors, and it was great to be able to pay them back and actually give them a profit.
Yeah.
And like I said, get me back to zero. It certainly helped that now game companies were, I knew everybody, and it was just easier to talk to them. I always tell game designers this: when I went to Germany in 1990 for the first time, I didn't know anybody. I couldn't afford to go, but I felt like I had to go.
Right.
And so I hear game designers tell me a lot, I can't afford to go, and I'm like, that's crazy. You got to go.
Yeah.
And now, 20 years later, or all those guys that I met 20 years ago, a lot of them are running companies or they're in charge of product submissions.
Right.
And it is way easier now, obviously, and that's just networking, and that's a big part of running your life as a business, as a game designer. You have to, 50% of it or more is the business side. The easy part is actually designing games. There's way more creative people out there than me, but I feel like I'm one of the best at running my life as a business. And that's where I think I've really succeeded. You'd find the same thing is true with, like all the other big designers. They run their life very professionally, and and they do all the right things. They promote themselves, they network, and even like keeping track of all your games after you've had so many published. It's a lot more work than people think. I mean, there's a lot of administrative work involved, and that's fine. And once you're successful, you won't mind doing that. But it's tough. It's really tough. I firmly believe that I've just been incredibly lucky, and I think it's hard to. I wouldn't tell anybody that you're going to be a game designer, you're going to be successful to the point where you're going to be living a life of luxury. Wow, you got very little chance.
Yep. Tell me about the process or the time between Elven Land and Ticket to Ride. I mean, what did you have some games in there that didn't have much momentum?
No, I mean, not really. No, I mean, that was really the kind of the prime time. In 2001, I'm firmly convinced I would have won Game of the Year again, except a game called Carcassonne came out at the same time as San Marco and Das Amulet and Capital. I'm sure one of them would have won. So that was the luck and the timing. I would have been, if I hadn't already won with Elven Land, I would have been incredibly bummed about that because that was just really bad timing.
Yeah.
But no, I was working with Aaron Weisblum at that point and Richard Borg, and really had lots of ideas, really feeling very motivated. So that time between Elfen Land, when Elfen Land won, I was working at Ravensburger FX Schmidt USA.
Okay.
And enjoying working there, but putting in a lot of hours, and it was hard to design games. So I left in 2000 or 2001, and then at that point, really started cranking on game designs, and that was. From that point on, I felt like, okay, I was established as a game designer and really was enjoying doing it. I wasn't working as a waiter anymore, and I was just working.
It was
on
full-time
games.
game design.
Yeah, full-time, yeah. And then 2003, went to WBC convention, which I hadn't really planned on going. I had met Eric Houtemont and Mark Kaufman from Days of Wonder the year before, I think, at Origins. I'm not quite sure, actually, but I'd met them through Richard Borg. And they were at WBC. I had not set anything up with them, and I happened to have the Ticket to Ride prototype with me, and I asked them if they wanted to look at it. I said, sure. We sat down with them. My wife didn't play, but she was there, Janet, and one of my friends, Pitt Crandallmeyer, was there, and we played about half the game, and then Pitt had to go off to play in a tournament. And I said, well, you guys have got the idea. And I just clicked. They go, no, we were really having fun playing the game. I mean, I was like, I didn't realize you were having that, because, we were intensely into it. And he said, I'd like to take the game over to Paris and play it with the guys over there. He says, I can give you a decision in a week. And I said, sure, go ahead. I'm not showing it to anybody else this week. And he called me in a week and said he wanted to do it. So
fantastic.
So there were people always ask me lots of questions about did I know that Ticket to Ride was going to be a big hit? No game designer ever knows if anything's going to be a big hit, because if you did, you design it the first game you ever did.
Right.
But that was awesome. That was a great experience to sell the game in a week, and really he was so positive about it. But I think about how many things could have gone differently in my life, maybe I don't meet up with him. Maybe I don't go to WBC. I sell it to somebody else. Who knows whether
the timing.
Yeah, it's just timing.
So had you shown it to anybody else prior to that?
I had not. No.
Okay.
No. And I had planned to send it to lots of German companies. I just happened to have it there. I just happened to go to WBC that weekend.
Now, you didn't know it was going to be a big hit, but did you know that it had something about it that was grabbing people through your playtest?
I would say as a designer, for me, what I knew was the first time I played it, it was probably 90 to 95% done. What I had envisioned, I was out taking a walk in Beverly, Massachusetts one day along the shore, thinking about a prototype I had played the night before, and now it's kind of a running joke, but all my railroad prototypes are called Thunder on the Tracks, and nothing ever gets published as Thunder on the Tracks. But so this was Thunder on the Tracks number 17 or whatever I played the night before, and I was walking along the shoreline. I could tell you exactly where I was, and all of a sudden I was thinking about a different game, and I was thinking something really simple, and I just couldn't wait to get home to make this prototype. I was I used to be a runner, but at that point I was just walking, and the whole game was in my head, just walking home, and I just sat down and made that prototype. That prototype was, like I said, 90 to 95% of that published game.
Fantastic. And all you had to do was balance card prices and things like that.
Make little routes, yeah. And I mean, that's so unusual. You know, most of the time you design a game. Yeah, and you have to really work on it. I mean, game design is usually a lot of work and play testing. And every time I played the game, I thought, I don't need to change anything. You know, it's there. So it was great.
Fantastic.
And the cool thing about that for me is that there have been three or four games I've actually sold the first time I've showed it to somebody. Ticket to Ride wasn't the fastest sale. I actually showed a game in Germany once, and it was a 10-minute game. We played it, and the guy says, I'll give you a contract for it. And here's the shame, is the game never got published.
Right.
And I'll tell you why, because it was again in 2001, that magical year, and it was about knocking down skyscrapers. And so the game never got published. And you can understand why they would be a little sensitive about that. And so the game is still around. I really haven't shown it to anybody since then. But so we got a contract, got a little money for it, but it never got published. But that was kind of like a 15-minute procedure from taking the game out of the box to contract. That was great.
That's fantastic. Okay, so Ticket wins Game of the Year 2004, right? Was it old hat by then? I mean, you've done this before.
No, not at all.
Okay, so but how did it change your life at that point? I mean, after a few years of Ticket being out, there's lots of momentum behind it, lots of sales. You're starting to feel like this is really becoming this gateway phenomenon. How do you feel?
Oh, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, the first year was huge sales, obviously, the first Christmas. And my experience from Elven Land was the second year it was good sales, and then it just tailed off to where it sells a little bit. With Ticket to Ride, you know, the sales definitely tailed off, and then kind of went like this, and then a slow build. And maybe 2 or 3 years ago, really started to take the jump, probably because of Amazon, or maybe simply because there were just enough copies out there that you know, when somebody would play the game, you know, every time somebody played the game, they were playing with somebody new.
Yeah, and it multiplied like that.
And then when, you know, the iPad version came out, then there was a real bump. And then the really thing that's done it is the iPhone version.
Yeah.
I mean, just when sometimes they have free days where you can download the app free.
Right.
I mean, the numbers are just staggering. I mean, and so now there's so many people out there have it on the iPhones, you know, a certain percentage, whatever it is, buy the iPad version, certain percentage of those buy the board game. The sales are going up after 10 years of the game. I mean,
fantastic.
So I look at it, I mean, is that exciting for me? Of course. I mean, it means two things to me. It means, one, I won't ever have to worry about money again, because we have a track record to look at of Carcassonne and Settlers, and you know, they've done the same thing. They've been going for that long.
Right.
The other cool thing for me, and this is really fun, is every time I work on a Ticket to Ride product, I know it's going to sell.
Right.
It's
a built-in audience knowing that.
I know, and it's just.
Does that change your passion as a designer? Do you feel like if you know it's going to sell, do you put as much energy behind it?
Oh, I mean, I'm like totally like, I want this to be, you know, great. I want it to be really, because I know that X number of people are going to buy it. I want it to be, you know, I want it to be really good. I want those people to say, you know, like they play it and they're refreshed. I mean, it's a new game for them. So, and it's real hard to work on other games. I do work on new games. I haven't published much new since then because I bring it out on the table and play the first time, and I go, well, you know, it's an okay game, but it's not going to sell 1 million copies, you know, and it's real hard to get excited about it. So, right now I have a few prototypes. I think, you know, I actually will show to somebody. But I mean, working on Ticket to Ride and actually working on the 10 Days series from out of the box. They don't sell anywhere near the numbers of Ticket to Ride, but that's fun for me too because there's a real built-in audience, and so I really want to make every one of those games really good and make it seem familiar to the players because that's what they loved. You know, they love the base system, and make it different enough that it's a refreshing experience for them.
Right.
Yeah. So it makes me very passionate when I'm working on them. Yeah, and the rest of the time I have lots of ideas, and I have a basement full of, you know, prototypes and stuff, and some of them will come out eventually, but it's not a big deal, you know.
Okay.
And it's kind of, that's the luxury of a hit, is like you can just do what you want at that point. It's great.
So, I mean, how has it changed your personal life too? I mean, have you gotten some prestige from this, and does it feel different now?
I mean, I don't know. It doesn't. I don't care too much about fame.
Okay.
So I like the money. I love getting that quarterly royalty check. That's a real fun day every 3 months. You know, my wife and I love to travel. We just bought a beautiful house. This is the house the Ticket to Ride bought. that's all great. She's a lawyer, but she's going to leave her job for 2 to 5 years so we can go travel and raise a puppy and take care of our house.
Great.
You know, I mean, if Elven Land and Ticket to Ride don't come along, I don't know what I'm doing in life. You know,
Yeah.
I worked as a waiter on and off for 15 to 20 years, and I wasn't miserable. I'm not a miserable person, but
Right.
you know, if I had to be still doing that, I don't know. I might be miserable. I don't know. It's tough. So.
Do you feel like you have another gateway hit in you at that caliber?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about a couple of prototypes I have now.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, and you know, you try not to get too excited, but I mean, my whole goal in life is to have another hit or to win Game of the Year again. Yeah. It's such a great experience, and that would be super. When you go to Essen, when you've won Game of the Year, it's like you're king for that week.
I'm
It's
sure.
great. I mean, some of my great memories are like one of the department store. I can't remember if it was Kaufhof or one of the others. They had about 1,000 copies of Ticket to Ride against their wall when Essen opened. I probably signed like 3/4 of those.
Oh my God.
You know, so people would just be lined up, and like
Yeah.
I'd be sitting there signing people and just giving. It was just great.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was awesome. So I don't know. That's just. I wish every game designer could have that experience because
Yeah.
it's really the ultimate reward.
It's got to be.
Yeah.
Well, so tell me a little bit about your game design process now, your play testing. Are you looking for those responses from people when you're testing that really shows you they're engaged in the game, they're satisfied, there's attention in the way that I know Ticket to Ride provides? I mean, are you looking for that more than, because I know personally that's what I'm looking for. And if any game has influenced me, it's Ticket, because of that elegance entry level. It has such a long tail for gamers too.
Right.
So what's that process like?
I'm a pretty confident person, so when I play something, I'm more focused on what I think, but I'm interested in people's reactions. I mean, and usually my friends are, you know, I play with my good friends first, so they're pretty brutally honest anyway, and they're going to say, you know, they're not going they're not going to be a yes person at all. They're going to say if they enjoyed it or not. Sometimes they enjoy it more than me. You know, sometimes I don't make people suffer. So if there's a prototype, if it's after 10, 15 minutes, if I don't think it's working,
You'll pull it.
we're just done. And sometimes people want to play more, but I've gotten what I need out of it.
Yeah,
you know?
I understand that.
So I mean, testing is interesting. I think the Ticket to Ride experience is what I'm looking for, where I sit down the first time, play it, and it's really good. That's what I'm really looking for.
You're looking for that on the initial play, where you're like, oh, it's 90%.
Absolutely.
And that's the one you're going to go with.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The design process is, I'm not a high-tech person, so, you know, I started out with, Elmer's glue and stuff like that, and photocopies. For me, big breakthroughs were glue stick and when these Avery labels came out, and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So it's coming. I mean, now today you can make, anything on the computer so easily that even a low-tech person like me, making a prototype is just so easy.
You've got to see my prototypes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm laminating cards and cutting the corners, and I fool so many people. They don't even know it's a prototype.
I know. And game companies don't really care about that.
They don't.
I mean, they just, but it's fun to have a nice prototype. Then it doesn't influence the playtest in a negative way.
Right.
I think,
There's buy-in immediately from your
exactly,
testers.
yeah. But so that process, I mean, I literally took like 2 weeks sometimes to make a prototype years ago, and now you can do it in a few hours usually. And there's bits. I've been collecting parts for games for years. One of the last few times I was at Essen, I would be at the flea market, and I'd buy a game, dump the parts into my bag, and give them back the rest of the game because I was just looking for specific parts like ships or things.
Okay.
And so I have tons of parts. I've been starting to get rid of a bunch of them because what I use mostly are just blank cards and meeples, and sometimes if I need a specific themed item, I try to keep some of those.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just so much easier. And Janet is awesome. She's like the dream wife. I was married a couple times before that were absolute disasters. Janet is she's really supportive. She's happy to help. She's positive. She's a good game player.
Yeah.
So
that's a blessing.
It is. It's great. And so she's real enthusiastic about it too. I can sit down and talk to her. Obviously, sometimes she has great ideas. So that and just lots of good friends. It's all really helpful.
How about the self-editing process? If you have a design that is not that 95% done, how do you know, and are you getting better at knowing what to pull out and how to edit compared to the late 90s?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's, if you feel like the game has potential, but you're not quite sure where to go with it, that's a tough part of game design. And sometimes I'll put the game away and try to come back to it. Sometimes I'll struggle with it for a while. And I'm one of my strengths is I'm good at knowing when it's good enough. When it's not going to get appreciably better. A lot of people, I think, they have that real perfectionist streak in them, so they're always trying to make it perfect. That's a tough way to live. You got to decide. But a lot of times, I play a prototype the first time, and it's okay, and maybe I could work on it, but it's like, it's going to sell. It's going to be a gamer's game. I love the gamers, but I'm not looking for a gamer's game. It's too limited. I'd like them to like my games as well, but I really want to reach out to grandma and the kids and everybody. The best 2 emails I've ever had in my life I actually got within a week. They were so similar, it was amazing, but they were from 2 people. Both said they had taken the game over to their grandmother's house and played with their grandmother and their kids. And then the next day the grandmother had called and said, next time you come over, you bring that train game back. Both emails were almost the same. I was like, I thought, that's great.
That's all I need to hear.
And then right after that too was there was a group of nuns, I think, up in Minnesota who posted something on Board Game Geek and said almost the same thing, like they'd been playing Ticket to Ride. I thought, wow, that's pretty cool, And today we were to the point where coming out here, a bunch of people were on the plane together, and they were talking about the gathering and games, and a guy in the row in front of them turned around and said, do you guys play Ticket to Ride? And I was like, wow, that's so cool. Now we're getting into the real masses. So that's great. Wolfgang Kramer, I always remember, Wolfgang Kramer is a really good guy. And he said one time, if he stood on a street corner, I think in Berlin, and asked 1,000 people if they knew who he was, he didn't think anybody would know who he was, or maybe one person. And I think that's just totally true. That you need to put it in perspective. I always think about being like a named game designer. It's kind of like being a big fish in a little pond in Vermont somewhere. It's a long way from the city. That's so you're a big fish in your little pond, but you're not really known beyond that. And part of that's just the whole. I'm very passionate about having my name on the box, and really, I think America is all about hype and personality. And I think game companies don't get that yet. That you really want to make the designer an issue. When I read a book, I read 30, 40 authors. I don't care what the book is. I read it because of them.
For the author.
Absolutely, I pick up every game. Or I pick up every book by them. And I think people, if somebody was smart out there, they'd be trying to do that with game designers. And if I ever have another game with Days of Wonder, I would want them to put by the designer of Ticket to Ride, like a flash on the outside of the box, put my picture on the back, try and build that, because there's no negative involved at all. It's just a potential positive of playing to the hype and the personality of America.
Of course.
So.
Have you pitched games to Days of Wonder since Ticket?
A couple, a couple. And I have, they're obviously my first choice, although I'd love to have a game by Hans and Gluck. Bernd Brunhofer, he's one of my heroes, and he's a great guy. And so I'd love to have a game by Hans and Gluck too. But Days of Wonder, I have a great relationship with them. They're really, they're fair, and they're just very, good businessmen. So obviously I'm going to show them probably anything first.
Sure.
So pretty soon I'll be sending them something. Yeah.
Good. How do you feel about games today compared to, 10 years ago? Are you still passionate about playing in a casual environment? Oh, absolutely, yeah. In fact, only really. I like to play with my friends. I can go to big game conventions, but they're not really fun for me. Just and I'm sure there's lots of nice people there, but I'd rather be playing games with my friends, in my house or their house. I like to try new games. I'm happy to play anything at least once just to see what it is, what's new about it. That's where ideas come from. But I'd rather play like the 10 or 20 games I really love, and that's really, and some of them violate like all my rules for things that I would normally like. Right. But yeah, I just love to play games, and I love to play cards no matter what. I love to play poker.
some people might not consider that the same type of game, but
Right.
to me, it's the same thing, just in a different arena.
It's interaction. It's a game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I absolutely still thoroughly enjoy games with my friends. Every March, I go to a little event that's about 12 days long at a B&B. We're about 20 friends, and it's so relaxing. It's
Yeah.
just, there's no agenda other than to socialize and play some games.
Right.
It's great. Yeah, I mean, well, I definitely have an affinity for cards. Any game that doesn't have cards is, it doesn't guarantee that I'm not going to like it. But Richard Borg said one of the most brilliant things ever. He's a great friend, and he said the most brilliant design ever is a deck of cards. He said, because every time you deal out the cards, he said, you're thinking you're going to get the perfect hand, the greatest card. And when you don't, a couple minutes later, you deal out the cards again. He said, it's just the most wonderful mechanic. Yeah. And so that really works for me in games. Like, I'm excited about, like, oh, this is it. I'm going to get that perfect hand.
Yeah.
So recently I played a little card game called Cabo, C-A-B-O, which I'd never heard of. I have another friend, Al and Kathy Bargender. Al likes to get obscure games and play them. He introduced me to that, and I thought, wow, what a great game. It's simple. It's just a deck of cards. And, now it's one of my favorites. And I don't know if it really gains that much depth as you play it, but it gets a little more interesting. There's a little more strategy to it.
Sure.
I love games like that. I love this game Love Letter.
Yeah.
It's 16 cards. Is it 16 cards?
It's 16 cards.
16 cards. It's the most brilliant design ever for the least amount of components.
Yes, it is.
Every game is different. I've played it probably more than 50 times already, and I love it. And what I'm dying to see is, can they come out with a one-card expansion?
Yeah.
Because that's all they can do. They can't add like 4 cards.
Right.
But it's just brilliant. Whenever I played that the first time, I thought, oh my gosh, I just wish I had designed that.
Yeah.
That's my feeling about all the games I love. Is like wow, that's just awesome.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes I play these really involved gamer games, and I think like, I couldn't possibly design that. Yeah. It's just so involved. It's like, and that's the art of game design to me. To me, the art is to take everything possible out and have the least product in there that's fun. Whereas I think most game designers today have the opposite. They're trying to put the most in and kind of chrome. It's kind of like the Avalon Hill days. With the war games were in some ways pretty easy to design because you could put anything in them you wanted. You could just make it more complicated. To me, the real art of game design is to make it the least complicated possible.
Streamline as much as possible. It's just Steve Jobs' idea too. You know, just streamline everything, refine
Apple
it,
computer,
and keep pulling it out. And if you still have a solid product, then it's very approachable, very teachable.
Yeah, exactly. You want it to reach the biggest audience. I won't tell you who it was, but a young German game designer years ago said to me, he said, I'm only interested in designing good games. And I was a little bit insulted, actually, because I felt like he was saying, well, I'm only interested in, money and designing junk. And I thought, like, my games aren't junk. They just appeal to a bigger audience. That's but what he meant was he wanted to really appeal to those gamers, like the real fanatics. He wanted the #1 slot on Board Game Geek. Well, I'd love to have the #1 slot on Board Game Geek too, but I'd rather have $1 million.
Right.
So that's the difference. So I don't know whether I haven't been back to SM for a while, but I would love to talk to him again and ask him if he still feels that way.
Right.
Because I think with age, you want a little more comfort in life, and so all that idealistic, I want to design the best game in the world, that kind of gets replaced by, I want to go on a cruise.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about board game mechanics. For example, on Board Game Geek, there are only 51 game mechanics listed.
Yeah, interesting.
And tens of thousands of games.
Yeah.
Part of my desire is to create the next game mechanic, not necessarily a fantastic game, but it should be both, hopefully.
Right.
I think the latest one is deck building, pool building is the latest one to be added to that list. Do you think that is a critical component to having the next Ticket to Ride or the next major seller like a Dominion? You don't. You think it's a mix?
No, don't get me wrong. I mean, when I look at the history of games in my life, I mean, there's only a few unique games. I mean, D&D, started a whole genre. Magic started, and really Trivial Pursuit, although the genre was really there. I was playing like party games when I was a kid with my family on paper and pencil, but it really spawned all of the party games.
It did.
you
It
know.
brought games back to the
Right.
table in the early 80s.
I don't think it was very innovative, but it spawned a genre. I think Dominion is a game like that, except Dominion doesn't exist without Magic, so you
Right.
kind of have to give half the credit to that.
Yeah.
And then I think Pandemic, with the whole cooperative thing, where you see so many other games like it.
Yeah.
I think those are the unique games. And Wolfgang Kramer, to go back to him, he always said he wanted to invent a new genre of games. He wanted to, and he said he didn't think he would do it in his lifetime, but that was his goal. I would say that's not my goal. I really firmly believe in taking something that's familiar, like people want something that's familiar. And I think I had a really hard time deciding about Settlers. I loved Settlers when I first played it, and I was and I was amazed that so many family or wives in particular, non-gamer wives, really liked it. And I was trying to figure out, why is that true? And I think what I believe now is that it has some familiarity in it. It has trading, which goes to Monopoly.
Right.
It has die rolling, even though it's a little different.
They're used to it. They're used to the
exactly,
game.
yeah. And it just, so there is enough familiarity in the game. And certainly when you look at Ticket to Ride, I mean, it's rummy. There's a big rummy concept. The different one is Carcassonne. Carcassonne for me there's two perfect games in the world. Carcassonne is one of them. And the reason I love Carcassonne is because all you do on your turn is pick a tile, and you play it, and you can play a meeple. But it's even better than that, because you can take that tile and you can show it to the other players.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
And that's how cool is this, that
Yeah.
there's never anybody stuck. And so ever since that came out, I've been focused on can I get a tile game? Because I love the idea of the simplicity of tile games. But Carcassonne sets a really high bar.
Yes,
so
it does.
it's hard to live
Yes,
up to
it does.
that. But that's, for me, there are very few unique games. I think there's some really interesting mechanics. There's incredibly interesting mechanics. Some I like, some I don't. Worker placement games. I'm not a fan of worker placement games. Not that I don't think they're good games. It's just not something that appeals to me as really fun. Whereas drafting, like cards, and my friend Ian McInnes would tell me that the worker placement and drafting is the same thing, but it's not to me. I love to, you give me 7 cards and I have to choose one and pass the rest out. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why 7 Wonders, I tried to do games with drafting, and 7 Wonders does everything I would have wanted to do in a game, except it's a little too hard to teach.
Yeah. Iconography's a bit much.
Exactly, yeah, which is a shame because it's a great game.
Yeah.
And if if there was a way to make that simpler, I don't know if there is, and cut that teaching time the first time, I think that would be a huge hit too.
I agree.
I think that's the only impediment to that being just a super hit, because it's a great game. And once you've played once, you get it.
Yep.
But it's getting through that first that teaching period.
I think that the secret sauce in why Settlers works for so many people is that trading mechanic.
Yeah.
And I don't see it in as many games. As
No, you
think.
don't. And yeah, it's an interesting point. And I haven't tried to put it in any of my game designs, but that maybe I should be thinking about that.
Settlers it breaks turn rolls and
Right.
order. And
It gives you a lot of interaction.
Yeah, you're in there when it's not your turn. The dice might affect you when it's not your turn. But another thing that I think about Ticket to Ride is that North American board immediately invites a new player, a non-gamer,
Yeah, I agree.
into the world of what that's going to be about. And they just get used to it immediately.
Right.
They don't know exactly what they're going to do, but they're not overwhelmed by the board.
I agree. Yeah.
And I think that's a nice secret sauce.
And when we came out with Europe, I think that was clear too. Was Europe sells better in Europe, USA sells better in USA. It's kind of like having 2 base games, really.
Yeah.
And when you go to the different maps, one of the things you hear is that it takes people a while to get used to the geography.
Yeah.
And Americans are notoriously bad at geography, of course.
Right.
So. Yeah, no, and the trade. It's interesting to think about the trading, because in the times I have thought about putting trading in a prototype, I've always been looking for something new, and maybe that's just wrong. Maybe I should just do a game that has just the simple trading in, and just the rest of the game is what's new. And because I really do think people relate to that. Everybody's played Monopoly. I mean, and so you just want to make the rest of the game more interesting. Then that's cool.
But I think it's true. What we're identifying here too is that people really gravitate towards certain mechanics.
Familiarity.
And again, I've said that Ticket has really inspired my games the most. My latest one, Cinque Terre, borrows a lot of that card set collecting and harvesting, and people really like to do that.
Right, yeah.
They really like to do that.
I think there's a basic enjoyment in you get a set of cards and you get to lay it down on the
Yeah.
table. I think that's an enjoyable feeling.
Yeah.
You know, and it's an intermediate goal, which I once had a friend of mine when I played. It might have been Santa Fe the first time, and he said it's a pretty good game. He said it needs some intermediate goals, and I thought that's really a brilliant, insightful statement. And
Sure.
and I actually went back and thought about that, and ever since I think about that one. You want a game to have some goals within it, and you want it to build to a conclusion.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes you got that good tension in the pit of your stomach. You're not tense, but you're like excited, like, oh, can I win? Can I win?
Right.
Yeah, that's. Yeah. And Carcassonne, I just go back to Carcassonne. It's amazing to me that that's all you're doing is taking one tile. But like I'm interested the whole game. Every game's different. I'm like, I really need to play that, build that, finish that road or finish that castle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's exactly that. You've got those intermediate goals and you've got the build to the finish.
Yeah. Great arc to that game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's very underrated by the gamers. And that's okay. They that's fine. But as a game designer, I just think it's, like I said, one of the two perfect games. And just the other game is Adele Verpflichtung, which has had many. That's probably not the right way to pronounce it in German. It's had many titles. It's a brilliant game. It's basically rock paper scissors made into a fun game. And every time I play it, I think, wow, it's so brilliant. I think Klaus Tauber is a guy. When I think about him, he's won Game of the Year 4 times for 4 games that are completely different, and he's really a brilliant guy. And maybe people will remember him for Settlers, but I love his first 2. He won with Barbarossa first, but the second 2 were
Hoity-toity was in there.
Yeah, well, that's Adele. That's the
Yeah.
same game.
Yeah.
And Drunter and Druber, which is another really underappreciated game. It's one of the games I'll play anytime. It's just
Yeah.
brilliant. And the fact that it's kind of about outhouses, just the theme has, not, but it's just an absolutely brilliant. And those 2 games, and you look at those 4 games, they have nothing to do with each other, but he's just a brilliant guy. And again, when I as a game designer, like, I don't know if I was influenced by him or not, but I certainly think he's great.
Do you feel that we have a glut of games, and do you feel that gamers are too hypercritical, especially on first plays, of all types of games?
And there's definitely a glut. I don't know. I sometimes think that's bad, but I don't know. It's like the market. The market will settle itself. So if there's too many, people will just won't buy them, and companies will come and go. I don't know. I mean, Kickstarter seems like it's here to stay. So it's hard to know. I don't know. I mean, people are. One of the cool things for me is, like, when a game becomes successful, you get this certain number of people who are negative Nellies. It's kind of like that's one of the things that happens, and they go on like a crusade, to, like, they've got to comment on everything and say something negative. And I always think, like, why don't you go do something you enjoy? Why are you wasting all your time doing this for? But I'm amused by it because it's like they want to prevent other people from enjoying it, and I think that's a weird thing.
Yeah.
So people are I don't know, when I look at, like, Opinionated Gamers, which is a game site for real geeks, I'd say the reviews are very fair. Even when they're negative, they're very good reviews, and they tell you exactly why they don't like it. And usually more than one person rates the game. I think that's totally cool. I think you should be able, for my games, I think you can say anything you want about my games. I don't like it when people attack me personally, because what difference does that make?
Right.
But like, you can say anything you want about my games. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'll give you an analogy. When I go play poker, it seems like there's always some jerk at the table. And I think the reason for that is because some people don't have any friends, and so they can come to the casino and sit at the poker table, and those other 9 guys are stuck with them. Yeah. So it's like those are their friends
You're
for the
gonna be
day.
my friends for the day. Yeah.
So I think there's a certain number of people online, they're sitting lonely at home and they got nothing better to do, and they think the way to have people pay attention to them is to be negative.
Yeah.
And it's sort of sad, really.
Yeah.
But that's okay. They're not the majority, and I think whenever you look at something negative, if you're a game designer and you read something negative, you always have to remember that there's tons of people out there who are enjoying your games. Yeah. And maybe they're not writing as much, but there's tons of people out there.
Yeah.
I think it's better to focus on the positive.
Yeah.